Okay, now a very popular theory about The Boys Season 4 is about Joe Kessler, and as we all know, Joe Kessler was a very anticipated character for Season 4 because he's played by Jeffrey Dean Morgan. And now the theory that's going on here is that Joe Kessler is not real and he's a hallucination in Billy Butcher's head. So yeah, in today's video I'm just going to be discussing some evidence that he is not real and also some evidence that he is real as well, so please stay tuned. And now, before we actually get into the video, I'd like to ask you all to like, share, and subscribe. And again, thank you guys so much for the growth. Thank you guys so much for the support. I really appreciate it. And I would like to ask you all to like this video as much as you guys can. It helps a ton. But without further ado, let's get right into the video. And now, as we all know, Joe Kessler is a CIA agent and he has a long history with Billy Butcher. Right, you know, also Billy did save his life in the past as well, and also they didn't really dive way too deep into their backstory together, so I hope that we get more of that in the future episodes. And now, like, the evidence that Joe Kessler is not real is in almost every episode that he shows up in. For example, the very first episode, Joe just shows up out of nowhere, right? You know, and that's when no one else is around, right? Whenever Joe Kessler shows up, nobody is around there and it's just him and Butcher talking, and we haven't seen Billy Butcher ever mention Joe Kessler in front of anyone else. And of course that makes sense because he's a CIA agent, and also by the way that Joe Kessler is acting, it seems like that Butcher wants to keep it secret because, you know, his intents are pretty dark, right? He wants Billy to go back to the way he used to be, which if you see in Butcher's perspective, right, if he thinks that Joe is real, he doesn't want him to come in front of anyone. He doesn't want anyone else in the boys to know who Joe Kessler is. So yeah, it totally makes sense if he's real why he wouldn't show up in front of anyone, but more evidence is pointing towards Joe not being there. And one of the biggest proofs of that is that in season 5 at the very end, right, like the last shot, Joe Kessler and Butcher, they go back to the farmhouse where Victoria Newman was doing experiments on animals, and they go and it's revealed that they took in Samir, they cut off his leg, and they want him to make that virus again, and it's Joe Kessler that's influencing Butcher. And when Butcher says that you have to make that virus for us, and he looks back at Joe, we see Samir's face as well. He looks towards that direction, but it looks like that he's giving that sort of like expression that who the hell is there, right? You know, there's no one there. And if Joe was there as well, like, you know, Samir would be looking back and forth between Butcher and Joe. And on top of that, another piece of evidence is that Joe was standing behind Butcher, right? I mean, if he wanted to do some interrogation as well, and if he was real, he would have came and he would have talked to Samir as well. So this is the only scene where we do see Joe Kessler with another character other than Butcher, but this just proves that he may not be real. Again, like how I mentioned before, Samir's expression. He would have been talking to Joe as well. He would have said something to Joe, but he's only looking at Butcher like he's the only threatening one, because Butcher is the only one that's there and Joe is only in Butcher's head. And also another piece of evidence that Joe is not real is that how we see Becca showing up in Billy's head, right? That is confirmed, right? Becca is in Billy's head because she tells Billy over and over and over again that you need to save Ryan. And of course, we also saw her die in season 2 and all of that. So yeah, like the theory I have here is that Becca is showing up in Billy's head as well, and she's telling Billy to save Ryan and to help out Ryan and to take him out of there. Whereas Joe Kessler is saying that we have to use Ryan. We do have to take in Ryan, right? So that is the same mentality there. But also on top of that, where Becca is saying that you have to save Ryan and you have to raise him and stuff like that, Joe is saying that we have to take in Ryan, right? We have to kidnap him, or we have to get our hands on him in any way, and we have to train him against Homelander, which, again, both of these thoughts do come in Billy's head himself, right? He does think about both of those things. So it is very possible that these could be two sides of his personality, right? Like, not really personality, but like two voices in his head speaking to him and giving him different advice. Whereas Becca is giving him the good advice, right? Like to be more moral. Joe Kessler is giving him the more immoral advice, and whereas Becca wants Billy to improve, right? He wants him to be a better person and to be more of a forgiving person and just to help people and stuff like that. Joe Kessler wants Butcher to go back to what he used to be before. So again, my theory here is that if Joe is not real, this is what's going on, right? Like, you know, you have two sides of Butcher talking to him. One side is telling him to go back to what he used to be because he does miss his past, right? He does miss what he used to be, but also he wants to be a better person for Becca. But yeah, like, as much as I don't want this to be real, it looks like that they're gonna do a fight club with the boys and they're gonna make Joe Kessler in Butcher's head. Now I want to get into the evidence that he could be real. For one, he's a CIA agent, so of course he's gonna be more in the shadows, undercover, and you know, like, he's not gonna show up in front of everyone, right? Like, I mean, he does have a history with Butcher, and he's the only one that could really put a stop to this whole soup thing because he has influence over Ryan. So if you see that Joe is real, then he's basically using Butcher in a way to get Ryan into the CIA and do experiments on him, and also to manipulate him into killing Homelander. And also, we did see a few moments where Joe Kessler and Butcher are like, you know, they're handshaking and they're hugging and stuff like that, right? For example, in the first episode, right, you know, they meet and, you know, they shake hands, they hug. Whereas where Billy sees Becca, right, he's about to touch her, he's about to hold her hand, and she disappears. Now again, like, this could be a whole thing about, like, oh yeah, they want to keep a suspense that, you know, if Joe is real or not. But if Joe wasn't real, then I don't think Butcher would be able to hug him and shake his hand and stuff like that. Maybe, like, you know, the virus did affect his brain to the point where he's feeling sensations that are not there. But if this is evidence that Joe Kessler is real, right, like, you know, with Billy touching him and all of that, so I think that Joe Kessler himself has some alternative motives, and he wants to basically use Ryan into getting Homelander and to fully take control of him and to do what Vought failed to do, which is make Homelander more disciplined and make him listen to them. Because, like, again, like, the CIA is part of the US government, and the US government, they want to control soups more, right? You know, they see soups as more of a thing, like a ticking time bomb, right? So the CIA, of course, they would be up to the job of getting their own soup and to manipulate them and to making them more disciplined. And of course, a soup that's as strong as Homelander, they would want that on their side. So if Joe Kessler is real, I think his motive is to take in Ryan, to manipulate him, to make him more disciplined, and to make him the CIA's pet. Now, if Joe Kessler is not real, I want to get into some theories as to how did he die and why doesn't Billy remember his death. And now we do see in episode 1 that Joe does mention a mission, which is the Panjir Valley, and you know, this was in their past, right? That is a little hint that they give towards Billy and Joe Kessler's past. And he says that you dragged me out of there and you dropped how many bodies to do it. Now, like, it is possible that Joe Kessler probably died during that mission and Billy dragged out his dead body to bury him. But again, like, that is way before season 4. That's way before he took Temp V. So it would be pretty hard to forget a moment like that. And why would Billy forget Joe Kessler's death and not anything else, right? We haven't seen him show any signs of memory loss or dementia, such as Huey's father, right? Huey's father, he had dementia when he took the Compound V because he was in a coma, but Billy was completely fine and healthy. So why wouldn't he remember that? And that kind of is a loose end on that theory. So I believe that that's not real. But like, with that theory, I also want to mention that Joe has a scar around his eye, like, you know, around his temple, right where his eyebrow is. So my theory here is that Joe got hit around that area, and instead of surviving, he died, right? Probably some sort of debris or knife that hit him in front of Billy, and it probably shocked him to a point where he just wanted to forget about it. And again, like, the whole thing comes here that he saw Becca dying right in front of him. He doesn't forget that. He doesn't have any mental breakdown or PTSD from that moment. So why would he have that for Joe Kessler? But if Joe Kessler did die during that mission, I think that he got the scar from that mission specifically. And like, Billy remembers him being like that last time, right? Like with that cut around it. So in his mind he's hallucinating that Joe has that scar, right? He survived that mission and he's back from it. So yeah, like, that's just my theory as to why Joe has that scar and why this could be evidence that he's not real. But yeah, I really hope that Joe Kessler is real, right? I mean, if he's not real, then that's very underwhelming, because again, you got Jeffrey Dean Morgan for that role, and the main reason why a lot of people were so excited for Jeffrey Dean Morgan being in this role is that he could have possible scenes with other characters such as Huey, Frenchie, also Homelander, right? Just imagine Jeffrey Dean Morgan like acting like Negan in front of Homelander. That would be insane, right? So yeah, I really hope that this theory of him not being real is fake, and I hope that Joe Kessler is just working under the shadows and he has some other motive. But yeah, that's it for today's video. I'd like to ask you all to like, share, and subscribe. And again, thank you guys so much for the growth. Thank you guys so much for the support. I really appreciate it. And I would like to ask you all to like the video as much as you guys can. It helps a ton. But yeah, other than that, thank you guys so much for watching.